Yeah, so here's what I wanted to do. Now that I brought you back into the fold, I wanted to talk about subject 2 a little bit more. My original thought process was master lease. That's really a full day, and with all the financing and the team. How about the team? Was that awesome? Okay. Did you guys like that? Yeah? Cool. So I wanted to talk in a little bit more detail about subject 2. Why? Well, I think that subject 2 is interesting for a lot of people because you can do this with no money down and no money, or very little money, I should say. And all of you aren't in that position, but some of you may be in that position. So I wanted to help out the some of you, and in a sense, it's really the all of you. So let me give you some advice with these slides, as I normally do. Do not try to write down everything. Don't try to write down everything. That's just not, I know you think that you want to write down everything. I'm telling you, I would rather have you focus on Throw Up Boy, if you could, right? Just focus on me. I'll tell you the important things to write down. And with your coaches, these are the detailed questions. I'd like you to go over with them. This will be up on the site. You'll get to see it. But for now, just relax, enjoy. Don't get carpal tunnel syndrome by this. I'm going to be going through these slides very quickly as well. Okay, Steve? So you may not be able to write down all of the things that I put up there. It's going to be okay, buddy. I'll get you through it. Okay? All right? By the way, who would like to sit in front of me on the next airline flight? Anybody? Okay. All right. Jerry, he's a trooper. Right on. So here's what I want to talk about. How to purchase homes without credit, signing for debt, or taking out a new loan. We're going to talk about that. Pre-screening sellers and gathering information. What happens when we visit the property? How do we actually make the offer in subject 2? Analyze the entire transaction. Closing a profitable transaction, how that happens, and how you market for leads. If we have enough time and I can get to the end here before midnight, I'm also going to show you how this was also used during the foreclosure excitement as a scam. So I want to show you that. I want you to understand it so that you set it up the right way and you can approach things the right way. As with everything, I would recommend that you sit with your attorney and you talk about this strategy and what contract to put together, how to approach the seller, and how to make sure you're on the up and up. Okay? So, reality check. What resources do you need? Now, by the way, was that? Did I skip one? No. By the way, I know from Canada, you might say, well, John, I'm not actually in that market. I think this is something that you can do from afar. So that's why I also wanted to focus on this as well. You might be able to focus on this with a teammate in that particular market, however. So I'm going to leave that up to you on how you're going to design your business. Maybe get with a local agent there. Maybe get with a local, just a person you know in that market. But I think you could do a lot of this, if not all of this, from afar, if you set it up the correct way. Resources available. $100 to maybe $150 a month for advertising and about 10 to 15 hours per week. If you did this as a full strategy, I could see you getting away with this time input. Personality traits, well organized, follows a system, good follow-up, ability. If we just stop there, by the way. Well organized, follows a system, good follow-up. Who are we talking about? Goals. Very good. If you're in a relationship or your significant other is a gold and maybe they're not participating in the investing with the Steve Martell Group or what you're involved in with your real estate investing, this might be a nice way to approach that. Give them something to do. The ability to close, be able to use a computer, Microsoft Word, be trustworthy. Some of those are left without saying. You don't need to say them, but I do think it's going to take some skill set with sending out letters and being organized on the computer. Perspective, and that's probably the big thing here with seller subject to, is you have to have a perspective with regard to what that seller is kind of going through. And we're going to get to this point here in a moment. I think it's going to take some delicate communication sometimes with this seller. Mortgage payments, remember this, mortgage payments must be made on time. This does not need to be your money. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're taking a property subject to, one of the things that I would recommend is that you remove actually that seller, and I'll be talking about this a little bit later here, but removing that seller from the house. So it's perfectly clear that this is an actual sales transaction. A change of ownership will happen. I do not want the owner to stay in the house and be any confusion that that is their house. That's a first basic step. So when you remove that person, obviously you'd like to fill that with a renter. The renter is going to pay you, and you're going to pay the mortgage. You're going to pay that mortgage, because there is no sense in you getting that owner caught up on their mortgage payments, having that owner move out, you putting a renter in there, you collecting that rent, and if you don't pay that mortgage, the bank will eventually foreclose, and you will lose that money that you used to catch up that mortgage with. The 110-3 rule of thumb applies. To find a good house, the investor looks at 100, finds 10 good ones, makes offers on 3, and purchases 1. You see that vary from strategy to strategy, and this is about what it is. So there's a lot of work. That's why that 10 to 15 hours per week come into play. Okay? I keep losing my clicker here. So let's talk about the strategy. The strategy of buying houses subject to. Subject to, for those of you that don't know, is taking ownership to homes without taking out a new loan or signing for debt. You're taking the property subject to the mortgage that's already in place. It's a buying strategy where you're taking ownership to homes while keeping the seller's existing financing in place. This is usually for a short term. One of the other factors that we use in mitigating any type of due on sale clause or activity is we're not planning on, if this is a 30-year fully amortized loan, we don't necessarily want to keep that loan in place for the 30 years. We're looking for appreciation in sale. We're looking for an eventual refinance, something. So I would consider this a short-term scenario. When is this a good strategy? Well, I think subject to, ironically, is a pretty good strategy to use a lot of times in a lot of different markets. But the way I see it right now is it will work fairly well today. Why? Well, when a homeowner can't get caught up on their mortgage payments due to the economy, due to higher interest rates. We have had interest rates move up on home loans fairly recently, due to any of the other things that we talked about today, sickness, divorce, death, all those things. That's when I think this scenario could be applied. This scenario for the owner of the house is really, if you think about it, this is a bank REO in its infancy. This is when it starts, is when the homeowner has a problem. They lose their job, their spouse loses their job, the interest rate creeps up, there's sickness, divorce, death. I hate to be negative, or maybe they're just getting a job transfer. Something's going on here. Okay, remember, when a property is for sale, there's always a problem to solve. This may be even taking place prior to that owner putting the house on the market. But this is another way that you can fish upstream. Does everybody kind of see that? Okay? This is really way ahead of time of the bank REOs. Way ahead of time. This is one way that you're going to fish upstream. And I think that if you approach it the right way and you approach it like a business and you approach it as if you are providing a solution to a problem, I think you could put together a nice business here. Will lenders work with me? Well, that question is like it's a little double-sided. Number one, the lender with the loan. We're going to talk about that, how to deal with that lender. Will lenders work with you in refinancing the property? Sure, you actually own the property, so if you've got it to the point where the value is higher than the liability on it currently, where do we get all these bugs at? That's probably from those guys taking off their shirts. Just kidding, Sil. But we do have a number of different small fruit flies up here. I'm not sure what you guys got going on. I just want to let you know in case you need to do something about it, right? So will the lenders work with you? Yes, because this is a traditional, this would be just like a traditional situation when you're going to get a refinance, assuming your credit's in line and all that, or if you're using a scenario where you don't have a Social Security number, which a lot of you do not, you're using a non-conforming lender to do your refinance. Same scenario, okay? Subject to purchase, the act of a buyer taking ownership to a property while the financing remains in the name of the seller. Let me give you some key terms and definitions. Some of these will change state to state, depending on what their, I'm going to use this word, nomenclature is there. A deed, a document used to transfer ownership of a piece of property. Sometimes you're going to use something called a quitclaim deed. It's a one-page form that transfers ownership. General warranty deed, a transfer of property wherein the seller warrants the buyer's rights under ownership. This is done a lot of times through the title company or through an attorney. Deed of trust, a document transferring title to a trustee who will transfer it to the owner after the owner meets specific payment terms of an underlying note. This would be a little bit more of an advanced or a different situation with regard to property ownership. We'll talk about this specifically a little bit later as well, but I just wanted you to know the general terms here. Comparables, properties that have recently sold and which are very much like the subject property. They are used in determining the likely sales price of the subject property. One of the reasons that I ask you to work with a team or a person on the ground in your market, and this could be a real estate agent, is because of comparables. It's one thing to pull comparables off of Trulia or Zillow. It's another thing to be working with an agent and have them put together a CMA, a comparative market analysis. You could even go to a broker and get a broker price opinion. You want to stay up to speed as far as what is going on with the sales prices and values in your neighborhood. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Assignment of rents and leases. A contract giving rights, ownership rights, maybe that's a typo there. Ownership rights of the lessor to a new party who will then act as the lessor. Rights of the lessee are usually not affected. When Steve or Stephanie actually signed on the dotted line, there was an assignment of rents contract here that was signed as well. Those rights are now passed to the new owner. You want to make sure that you get an assignment of rents clause when you're doing a subject to purchase. Okay? Make sure that that document is in there, especially if you're doing a subject to property that is already an investment property where tenants are in place already. So here's what we have kind of going on here. The seller owns the property, and all of a sudden there is a layoff, a firing, somebody gets sick, divorce, you name it. Something as simple as somebody gets hurt, they work for a job, they get paid hourly, they work for a job, and they get hurt and they don't have, somebody didn't have workman's compensation. Or, you know, it's a contract job. I know somebody recently, last month, they got laid off because it was a contract job. It ended in March, and they laid the person off, and they're unemployed. They're collecting unemployment insurance, and they cannot afford that home anymore. So all of these things come up. That owner owns the house, they've got debt, and they got a mortgage, and they've got a deed and ownership. So everything's great until they get into the position where they can't make those payments. Or they've made all the payments, but they just can't make them anymore. Does everybody see how this scenario would happen even today, ongoing? This is really, if you think about it, a bank REO in its infancy. This is where this thing starts to take place. It's a tadpole, if I had to give it an analogy. Does everybody see that? This is the very time frame in which this leads to the notice of default, the NOD. This leads to pre-foreclosure. This leads to the auction date or foreclosure auction. It either sells at the auction or doesn't sell at the auction. If it doesn't sell at the auction, it becomes an REO, a bank REO. So this is how you can kind of fish upstream and change that. What's interesting here is all that's happening with subject to is this magic trick. Is that cool? Look at that. Boop, 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 boop. Anyway, do you want to see the card trick again? No, I'll just say. So what's happening is a contract takes place here. That's one finger, not my middle finger, but one finger. Wow. Okay. All that's happening is the debt and mortgage is staying with the seller. The ownership is going to you, the buyer. That's it. Now, I'm going to talk in a moment about the scenario with this when time has progressed a little bit here, where that owner of that property has missed some payments. Maybe they've gotten the NOD, maybe they have not. But in that scenario, when this happens, right here, you're still going to have a sales contract with a subject to addendum to the contract and also an assignment of rent. So I've talked about 3 documents there. I hope you've written all those down. Sales contract, subject to addendum, and assignment of rents addendum. So when you put all those in place here, that's when this goes to here. Here to here. Is this where the fruit flies? There were fruit flies when you guys left. I just want you to know that. Up here, they were flying around. I think it was from Sylvan.
Good.
Yeah, right. He knows. So as soon as this goes from here to here, that means that you've got that contract signed and those addendums signed. And maybe, just maybe, that money has been transferred to the bank to get the loan caught up. Why would you want to have the loan caught up in this? Anybody? So it doesn't default. You're trying to stop the default. Absolutely. You want to stop those wheels, those foreclosure wheels from continuing. Once that's stopped and the loan is caught up, then you've got a normal situation. Now, we haven't talked about any of the numbers yet. We must make sure the numbers are in line. We'll talk about those in a moment. But I want to make sure that you know the process here, okay? Yes, question?
Once they receive the NOD, is it too late for them to go to the bank and ask for a short sale?
Trying to do with the short sale? Everybody. Anybody know? Get out, take care of their problem, solve their issue. Short sales, there's nothing short about a short sale, by the way. Okay? They should call it a long sale. Let's get the long sale done. But they're trying to get out from underneath the problem when they do a short sale. They bring in an agent, they sell the property at probably below the mortgage amount for one reason or another. A subject to handles that issue in a little bit different way. It doesn't get them out from underneath the debt, it just brings the debt current. Now again, we haven't talked about the price point of the house and the amount of debt and all of that. We're going to get to that in a moment. But I just want you to know that from this phase. You could actually do a short sale prior to the NOD. Absolutely. Okay?